Hello and welcome to Pan Society Radio, your home for modern animism. I'm your host and founder of Pan Society, Laura Giles, and I have a guest today, Dr. Kweisi Ausar, who is an associate professor at the University of Nevada and author of the memoir No Sir, which is hot off the presses. So this book chronicles his experiences of abandonment, addiction, and workplace marginalization. And he and I are going to talk about something we never addressed here at Pan Society, so spirituality in the workplace. And now that I'm talking about it, it seems like a no-brainer, right? We take our spirituality with us everywhere. It's not just for holy days. But before we get to my guests, let's give thanks to the ancestors and the elements. I acknowledge the element of earth and thank you for the firm foundation upon which we live and the abundant food that you give us every day. Thank you for all the wonderful, sensuous things that makes our lives possible and meaningful. I acknowledge the element of air and thank you for carrying our prayers to our ancestors and helping spirits and bringing us their messages in the form of intuition and dreams. I ask that you help us connect to our unconscious childlike energy that we all have, that we're always gives us a source of inspiration to ourselves and others. And I acknowledge the element of fire to help stir our passions in positive connecting ways and gives us the will to see our ideas through. I acknowledge the element of water and thank you for helping us flow with the rhythm of life. And I give thanks to the water for the life-giving properties that it brings to all creatures. I acknowledge our loving, helping ancestors and angels who are always looking out for us. I thank you for being here with us today to guide our footsteps. And I ask that you speak to us in words and symbols that we understand so that we never miss your messages. I send you love and gratitude for all that you do every day. And thanks to everybody who's tuning in, who shares our podcast, asks questions and comments. All of that helps our Google rating. And if you'd like to help even more, please review us on iTunes. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Kweisi Ausar.
Thank you.
So let's start by getting your backstory on how you became interested in spirituality in the workplace. It's not something you hear a lot about.
Well, the workplace can be a challenging environment, right? Just under normal circumstances, there can be challenges.
Mm-hmm.
For those of us who see work as career, there is an intention to progress and to get to higher levels of authority. And sometimes there are barriers, there are roadblocks, there are things that either exist within our own development and or things that exist within others who, may not see us as being worthy. So through those challenges, I really sought to understand how to use my spirituality in the workplace. When I became an academic, it was real clear to me that was going to be the focus of my research. But from a practical perspective, I've always had these workplace battles, these workplace, some workplaces are toxic, right? You've got social hostility, you've got instability. Why don't we treat each other well, in the workplace? And what I realized, because, my goal was to become a leader and to move up the chain from a leadership perspective. What I realized was the importance of leadership when it came to the workplace context, the climate, the culture within the work environment. And so I started to study leadership in parallel with workplace spirituality.
So I think in the USA, this is my perspective, and maybe I'm living in a box, but it seems like most people kind of keep their spirituality to themselves, and it's like kind of off limits outside of church. So that's why I say it's something we don't talk. It's something that I don't talk about with people because it's kind of like a hands off. It's none of your business. So how do you navigate that when people have all different kinds of spiritualities?
Well, let me first address your question by differentiating religion from spirituality.
Okay, good. Yeah, let's do that.
I see them as separate and distinct areas of focus.
Okay.
Now, one would argue that it's difficult to have religion without spirituality, right? I think that's a valid argument, but it's absolutely possible to have spirituality without religion.
Absolutely. Yes. Totally agree with that.
Okay. You know, and to boot, I've seen people who claim to be religious act in ways that are inconsistent with spirituality, right?
I agree with that too.
So there's it's important to distinguish between the two. And so workplace spirituality is defined in both the management literature as well as the organizational literature, and now even in psychology, as consisting of three distinct factors. First factor, meaningful and purposeful work. Second factor, a sense of community. Third factor of workplace spirituality is the alignment of individual values with organizational values. So to the extent that an individual can find and sustain both meaning and purpose in the work that they do and at the place that they work, we've achieved the first level of workplace spirituality.
Got it. That's just too intelligent. I think if all businesses operated in that way, then I would be out of a job. So I'm a therapist.
Well, interestingly, there are organizations that seek to create the condition where people can experience workplace spirituality. I've worked with some. Starbucks is one.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, they if you know, if you really look closely at their values are purely spiritual. As you know, I did some leadership training for Starbucks supervisors one time, and I was amazed at the work that they do, the good that they do, right, outside of the context of the workplace, that really taps into the spirit of the workplace, you know, and they don't advertise it, you know, the kind of charitable work and outreach that they do. They don't use it as a marketing scheme. They do it because it's the right thing to do. Their values are such that humanity, love, and humility sort of are foundational to them.
So that's clicking with me, because that's an example that I can see. I don't know if this is true everywhere, but quite frequently when I go into Whole Foods, it's a pleasant experience. People are happy. They seem to be glad to be there. They seem to be glad to help you out. And it's not just like, you know, some cold transaction where you just take their money or they just take your money and you just go. It feels like it feels very different than most shopping experiences.
Yes, I would totally agree. And Whole Foods definitely has that kind of a value structure.
So what if you're a person you're an employee and you don't work in that kind of organization? Is there something that you can do to bring it to your day-to-day work life?
Well, I think one of the first things that we should examine is our choice of careers, right?
Oh, very good. Yes, I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, too often we think about work as a job, and you know, to your point, a transactional thing that we have to do in order to pay the bills, and that's true. There's definitely an extrinsic, you know, there's extrinsic importance to work. There's economic importance to work. But if we view work as a career and we view work through the lens of, let's say, work is a calling, then we're able to step back and say, okay, what is it that I'm good at? What are my talent? What are my God-given gifts? What are those talents that lie within me that allow me to excel? And if we can objectively come to some understanding of what those innate, born-in gifts are, then we can choose occupations that are aligned with our strengths. And if we do that, we may find ourselves never working a day in our lives.
I totally agree with that, because I think I just had this conversation yesterday with a client who hates her job. And she's I have a lot of clients who are in high paying jobs that they absolutely hate, and they can't wait to not do them. And I couldn't imagine doing that. I love my job. I love going there every day. If it's a challenge, I am always learning new things to be better at what I do because I love it, not because it's a requirement. And I can't even imagine retiring. It would be like I don't know, I stopped living if I did that. So what are your thoughts on how, I think a lot of people grow up with the idea, either from their parents or culture or whatever, that you have to make this much money, you have to have this position in order to feel good about yourself, to be worthy. How do you go from that mindset? Because it's so programmed in our culture to, no, I'm gonna, not necessarily I'm gonna live my bliss, because I think there's problems with that too, because you do have to eat. How do you go from that to saying, no, I'm gonna have a purposeful work?
Well, I think, let me start with the first question that you raised, about people who hate their job, right? So I think it's important to make sure that we're clear on what is it that we actually hate. And I don't necessarily like to use the word hate, but we'll use it for this purpose. Is it the work, or is it the environment? Because there's a distinction between meaning and purpose in the work that we do and meaning and purpose at the place that we work. Mm-hmm. And so, I had a similar situation at one point in my career where I thought I hated my job, but what it was, I hated my boss. Right? Because he created a toxic environment. Mm-hmm. And when you have to repeatedly go into a toxic environment, you can kind of conflate that with, the work that you do.
Right.
And so once I got clear that it wasn't the work, it was the environment, it was the leader that I was up under, then I had an opportunity to make some different choices. So
what do you do if you have a toxic boss? Because that's common.
That's tough. I've had them, right? And I would say that it really depends. It depends on the organizational culture. It depends on, the extent to which you're willing to level with your boss.
What do you mean?
Leveling means, I'll give you an example. A toxic boss I have and treats me poorly. And so I'm going to have a conversation with him. I'm going to have a high stakes conversation because I've had enough. I've hit the wall. I can't take no more. So I sit down with him and I say, I really like working here. But I get the feeling that you don't want me to be here. I get the feeling that I'm doing something that's causing you to treat me poorly. And I really want to know what it is that I'm doing that's causing you to treat me poorly, because I want to change that. I want us to have a great working relationship. And I want to feel good about myself and the work that I do. So please tell me what I need to do or what I need to change so that we can have a good working relationship.
Does that work for you?
In some instances, it has. In some instances, it's completely turned the situation around.
Yeah, I think that can, if you're dealing with a healthy person. But if you've got somebody who's got borderline personality disorder, narcissism, they are going to whip you.
Well, the flip side of that is you get more of that toxicity. How dare you say that to me?
Yeah.
Right? So there's a risk in leveling with your boss. The next thing would be to take above the boss. And I've done that before too, right? I've taken the issue to my boss's boss. And, and I would imagine that that would work in some situations, but in my experience, it didn't. Because my boss's boss just went back and told my boss what I said.
Yeah. So you
and
really
then
have a healthy workplace in order for these healthy strategies to work.
Yes, you do. And that's why a lot of my consulting and even some of my research is targeted at the organizational level.
Yeah.
Because I know that if the organization isn't, doesn't have values or has, mission statements and vision statements that they don't live, these placards on the wall.
Yeah.
There's got to be a willingness to reconcile that. And if there's not, then there's nothing for me to do, either as a consultant or as an employee in a system like that, other than find another job.
So who do you work for as a consultant? Like, who calls you and say, help us?
Oh, any number of organizations. I've done work with county library. I've done work with different restaurant brands, integrated resorts here in Las Vegas. I've done consulting with even a sign company that does these 3M signs. They wanted me to come in and teach on ethical leadership. And oftentimes these lectures or these presentations leads to more questions. And, for example, one organization had values, but they had not extrapolated those values into competencies that informed their selection process, that informed their training and development process, or ultimately their performance management process. So I've worked with organizations who wanted, a complete sort of alignment in terms of having those values being not just talked about on the wall, but in the selection, in the training and development, and in ultimately the performance management. Because if you don't measure what you value, you have to question whether you truly value it. Right?
So
if you say you value respect, but the principle of respect is nowhere in your people management processes, then I have to wonder, do you truly value respect?
So how would you measure that?
Well, you can measure selection through predictability and validity studies. You can link what you are, basing your interview questions on and your hiring decisions on in terms of values to outcomes, turnover.
Got it. Okay.
Performance. I mean, there's many outcome variables that you can test in that way.
So it sounds like you're saying spirituality in the workplace is about values and personal responsibility and kindness, those kinds of things.
It's definitely about values, but it's also about, we haven't talked about a sense of community.
Yes.
Right? Because we spend a lot of time in the workplace.
Right.
Right? I mean, a tremendous amount of our lives are spent working. So, what the research tells us is that, more and more people are seeking community in the workplace, a sense of belonging, a kind of interconnectedness. They want to be connected with others in ways that create this sense of community. I think in many of our neighborhoods across the country, we've kind of lost that. Here in Las Vegas, I will tell you that I've been here for 9 years and I've lived in 3 different communities, and in every community, everybody's got their windows, their blinds pulled, comes outside, nobody talks to each other. I mean, it's the worst I've ever seen, right? So I think, societally, we've lost some when it comes to community and just having a sense of community. So oftentimes people seek it in the workplace. And I would argue that organizations, more specifically leaders, have a responsibility to create an environment where people can get that.
How do you do community if you grew up in a family that didn't have it? So if your family is abusive, y'all don't talk to each other, nobody loves each other, you can't wait to get away from these people. How do you even know what that is?
You may not, but I think at a very basic level, self-determination theory tells us that we have psychological needs, and one of those needs is relatedness. We need to be able to relate to others on some level. So in the workplace, it's an ideal condition because we spend so much time together, because we have common goals and common, targets that we all need to hit, and we need each other. We're interdependent on each other. So there is the conditions are there for people to get a sense of community at work. They are there. Now the leader is primary to that.
I agree.
Right? Now each individual obviously is accountable to that, but it's really the leader that sets the tone and the mood for the kind of environment that we work in.
So do you feel like there is a greater challenge for certain populations? And I'm intentionally vague.
Demographically?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because I do. The workplace is forever changing, right? The demographics in the workplace are forever changing.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, leadership capabilities and leadership skill are in a constant state of, or there's a constant need to be on top of that. I think that I've operated restaurants in rural parts of the country club restaurants, as we call them, right? Because you can set your watch by, what time people are coming in, what time what time business is going to peak, what time it's going to fall off. Yeah. Everything is very consistent. And then I've operated restaurants in urban environments where there's no telling, right? When the guests are coming. Rest assured that it's not a normal peak for dinner because you got a second peak later on at night. So there's different workplace, or I should say business metrics that are going to be different, that create a different type of workplace. But everybody wants to be respected, sure. Whether you're urban or whether you are suburban or whether you are rural. Everyone wants to feel like they belong. Most people wake up in the morning and go to work with an intention of doing a good job.
Yeah.
Right. So the conditions are really the same. Culturally, the way people interact with each other may be different, but the needs are the same. The psychological needs are the same.
Do you feel like those cultural differences create barriers to connection and belonging?
Well, when you start to, they can, but they don't have to, right? If it's a principle-based approach, if it's a values-based approach, then there's no reason why there should be those differences.
I agree. I totally agree.
Now, when conflict arises, it's incumbent upon the leader to manage that conflict and to do it in a way that's fair and equitable, and that understands the different perspectives, particularly if you're dealing with a multicultural, multiracial workforce.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as easy. And I've dealt with situations like that. But it all goes, to me, it all goes back to the principles or the values that you're living by in that workplace.
So when you get pushback, because it sounds like it benefits everybody to do this, everybody is respected, it's nice and calm. When you get pushback, what is that usually about? Like, people don't want to do this.
Well, there compatibility. Here's my philosophy on that. That's why you have selection processes that you have. You hire people that not just have great job fit like capabilities, but also have organizational fit capabilities. So you on the front end, you test people for their values. And so you're less likely to have that, be an ongoing problem. But yeah, it pops up. And at the end of the day, compatibility is a condition for employment. If you can't get along with us, then perhaps this isn't the right place for you to work.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that one rotten apple is going to spoil the whole bunch isn't going to happen if I'm the leader.
Right.
Right. So either you adjust yourself accordingly from a values perspective, or you go look for another job, or I help you go look for another job. I mean, it's sort of those three choices. And that's why leadership is so critical. Leadership isn't always a soft thing, right? If you want to maintain a healthy culture, you've got to manage any kind of insurgency that could disrupt that culture. I want everybody to succeed. I don't want anybody to fail. I want to bring everybody along, and I'll work with you if you got the right attitude and the right perspective. If you don't care and you're disruptive and combative, you probably need to find somewhere else to work.
Mm-hmm. So you seem real passionate about this. What is your story? What's your experience? What makes this your thing? What drove you here?
Well, I came up in a restaurant system, a restaurant company. Started out as an employee, was fortunate enough, blessed enough to become a senior leader in that organization. Spent 23 years doing this. So I got to experience what it's like to climb the ladder internally against toxic leaders, against organizational culture, or I should say regional climates that were not conducive to my success. As an African American male in the corporate world, I had some extreme challenges with what I perceived as workplace discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to cut and run, right? But and I didn't for 23 years, because my theory is that it's not going to be much different. Like you got to figure out how to work through this.
Yeah. And
you got to figure out how to defeat this. Now, there are times when the pressure becomes too great. For example, I quit my job, $200,000 a year. I was making, big money. In the middle of a recession, I quit because I couldn't take it anymore. Mm. So there are break points, right? And maybe I stayed too long because the cumulative effect of dealing with, marginalization and discrimination took a toll on me.
Right.
But it didn't destroy me.
Yeah.
Through the spiritual cultivation that I had been doing all these years, that's what enabled me. And that's what my book is about. My book is really about how spiritual cultivation can help one to transcend abandonment issues, addiction issues, workplace discrimination issues. Because along the way, I was constantly working on developing my spiritual faculties. Constantly. And I'm not talking about church per se, although I did spend 3 years in Christianity, and I talk about it in the book. Deeply embedded in Christianity. And I was even a chaplain for a couple of years, volunteering in hospitals and but see, I'm the type of person, I ask a lot of questions. I dig deeper. I want to understand why. I want to understand what's underneath what we believe. Mm-hmm. And what I come to realize is that, and over time, I've dabbled in Hinduism, a little bit in Buddhism, New Age thought. What I've come to understand is all religions are built on philosophy. Like philosophy existed long before religion did. So when I started asking questions, in the Christian context about different things, I was kind of told, don't worry about that. You believe this because it's written in this one book, and this is what you believe. And I just kept digging deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until I found that, what satisfied my inner need for truth. And I don't, downplay Christianity. I don't downplay anybody's religion. We're all striving and seeking to find, spiritual truth and to find the kind of peace, inner peace that gives us life. So I don't, but my experience in Christianity wasn't necessarily a good one. I shouldn't say it wasn't a good one. I'm no longer in that space. Mm-hmm. Let's just put it that way.
Mm-hmm. I find it interesting that, so I scoped out your website and, and I saw that you do heart math. I think that's a really interesting and useful segue. So can you tell our audience what that is and how those intersect?
Well, as you study spirituality, and particularly the ancient Egyptian systems of spiritual cultivation, you find that there is an intense focus put on the heart. The heart is a physical organ, but also the heart as a spiritual entity. And, what heart math is about it's about the science of heart rhythm and its relationship to emotions, right? The extent to which we can manage our emotions, the extent to which we can control our reactions, our emotional reactions, the extent to which we can manage the energy that we carry in our body, it gives us life. And I'm talking life more abundantly in the physical sense, because much of the illness that we see in today's society, although the food is killing us big time, it's the stress, it's the energy that we carry within our bodies. And heart math is about the science of understanding the relationship between the heart, the brain, and our well-being, and giving us techniques to manage and to control that energy that we carry within us.
So I'm still looking for the link.
Okay.
So maybe I missed it.
Between heart math and spirituality?
Yes.
Well, spirituality is also, if you go back into, some of the most ancient of philosophies, the principle of vibration I'm sure you've heard of the principle of
Yes.
vibration,
Uh-huh.
speaks directly to the heart and the energy that we carry within our bodies. So it's really about managing energy. Heart math is just a way to scientifically see it and to track our progress, because we look at this heart rate variation number. And as we work to become more coherent with heart math techniques, we are able to see it from a scientific lens, the progress that we're making, in addition to the increase in well-being that we feel and control that we feel when it comes to the energy in our bodies.
So let me give that back to you from a qigong perspective to see if my understanding is what you're saying. Okay. So in Chinese medicine, the heart is the universal harmonizer. Perfect. If your heart is good, everything's good.
Perfect.
And so it's holistic. It's, if everything's good, your spirituality is good, your mood is good, your health is good, everything's good. So it's I see that as a shortcut because, it's efficient.
Absolutely.
Okay. We're on the same page.
Couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And you see, that same philosophy is consistent with what the ancient Egyptians believed about the heart.
Yeah.
Now they had other things that they believed in terms of what happens to the heart after you die and all that, but on it really was about the heart, and that's really about the energy that we carry. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Ausar, for sharing your story. Can you tell our listeners where to find you and where to get your book?
Well, my book is on Amazon. No Sir is the title, Breaking the Chains That Bind Your Spirit. And it's available, in Kindle form. Or I should say, as an ebook. It's also available as a paperback.
Cool. Great information.
Absolutely. And my website is KweisiAusar.com. I can also be reached at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
Okay. And can you spell that website for us, please?
Sure. KweisiAusar.com.
Awesome. So that's our show for this week. If you want to join us virtually for a Moon Circle, check out our online calendar on our Facebook or MeWe page. Everything we do is about connection, self-discovery, and community. And I think spirituality goes with us everywhere. And growing that heart connection is key to a whole life. So thanks again, Dr. Ausar. And thanks everybody for joining us for this edition for Pan Society Radio. My thanks to the elements and ancestors. So grateful for you all being here and tuning in. See you next week.